While Americans give millions of dollars to missions in Germany, they still pay public taxes for the support of ministers. Now, these are Christian nations, formally, officially Christian nations: England, Germany, Italy, France. And yet, you have to ask yourself who has the better. Newt Gingrich, in talking about the mosque at Ground Zero, declared angrily that the Saudi Arabians would never allow a church at Ground Zero if the shoe were on the other foot. He's correct about that. But once again, we have to ask where we stand on religious freedom. Now, this can be abused. The notion that we have a secular government is sometimes misused to urge a secular society, and that's certainly something that Jefferson never suggested or would have supported. But he did emphatically join with the 18th century evangelicals in demanding a separation of church and state. Now, finally, and I'm not going to get into it in any great depth, we can deal with it later, and Peter referred to the misuse of history by people like David Barton and others. You know, this notion that Jefferson signed his documents in the year of our Lord Christ. I was at Monticello last year. They have 19,000 Jefferson letters. None of them are signed in the year of our Lord Christ. I mean, that's just simply a twisting of history. The notion that the Constitution is dated in the year of our Lord. Well, you know, as with many misstatements, there's always a kernel of truth. That's sort of true. The clerk added that at the bottom after the delegates had voted and left. The clerk, you know, writes in at the bottom the year of our Lord. The notion that Jefferson would send Christian missionaries to Indians using government money, again, a distortion of the facts. I'll leave with two thoughts. The one is that we need to remember, I think, these 18th century evangelicals and how devoted they were to this notion of separation of church and state. And the second is to respond to a comment that often comes up. People will say, and I've had historians say to me, well, it depends on what you mean by Christian nation, and I view this as a feigned objectivity. We know what is meant by Christian nation when people use the term in the modern discourse. If you want to say more than half the people in this country claim to be Christian, sure, that's true. But it's much like saying this was a white nation in the 1950s. Were more than half the people in the country white? Yes, that was true. But we know exactly what was meant when people said this was a white nation. It meant if you weren't part of that majority, you weren't quite a full citizen, you didn't get quite all the rights, you were subject to discrimination, and the same misuse of the term Christian nation is being done today. And it's something that was very expressly, emphatically rejected by our evangelical forebears.